The views expressed by the hosts are entirely their own and in no way represent the thoughts or intentions of the original author.
This podcast is a discussion, shared to spark thought and conversation on the characters and themes of this novel.
The interpretations presented in this podcast are just a few of many possibilities. Listeners are encouraged to read along and share their own analysis of the text.
Though the hosts speak mostly within the constraints of this book, series spoilers may be discussed with or without warning.
Explicit language as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, depression, self-harm, and death will recur throughout this podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
If you are enjoying the podcast, check out our Patreon for more exclusive content. You can find us at patreon.com/BookTok for BookTok.
Welcome to Book Talk for Book Talk with Jack and Amy, a literary podcast where we deep dive into the writings of your favorite novels. This winter, we're hosting a book club while we prepare for our 15-part analysis of Sarah J. Maas's A Court of Silver Flames. This is Jack.
And I'm Amy, and each week we'll discuss one book from our Winter Book Club roster. By using our literary background, we'll provide our flash analysis of each book, as well as discuss listener thoughts.
This week we're talking about The Witch Collector by Charissa Weaks. Wow, here we are.
Here we are.
Winter Book Club, feeling like I've never recorded a podcast a day in my life.
Yeah, why does it feel like we've been on a really long hiatus? And we definitely have not been.
Like we're recording tomorrow for Earth and Blood still. No, Sky and Breath. Sky and Breath tomorrow, yeah. And we recorded last week. But it does feel like a long hiatus because in many ways we haven't done a book club since summer book club.
It's true. And it's kind of exciting to get some fresh blood, as they say.
Yeah.
I'm a vampire bat.
No, stay away from those. Okay, yeah. This is rough. I'm sorry. It's because neither of us know what we're doing.
I am also tending to family stuff, so we are.
Yeah, that's the reason, and I have sympathies for that.
Yes. Makes all of our brains not work collectively.
Yeah, I feel like I should have listened to how this used to work, but whatever. First off the bat, one, we both listened to this, so we did the audiobook. I feel like that didn't hurt or help anything. Like I really enjoyed the audiobook, and this was my second read, Amy's first read. So
yes, and I went in knowing nothing about it.
Truly nothing. Yeah.
Truly nothing. So that was entertaining. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of our thoughts, reactions, analysis light, important, of certain categories related to the book. We'll also discuss listener thoughts that we collected through our Instagram account, and our listeners who follow us there responded.
Would you like to give me your first thoughts? Your initial thoughts?
Sure. I overall really enjoyed this book. I always feel like first person is risky. I always have felt that way. I felt it was a very sophisticated first person story. I really enjoyed, to my shock, for whatever reason, I enjoyed the female main character. I enjoyed the male main character.
To my utter shock, she did not piss me off.
If I think about when I first read A Court of Thorns and Roses, like it's very easy for me to become frustrated with female main characters when it's in the first person.
Especially like, what does this say about you, Amy?
I'm an asshole. That's what it says. So I really, really appreciate that this female main character has a quote unquote disability. What we would in our world classify as a disability. The inability to speak and having to speak through her hands was really fascinating in a magical world. I thought Charissa navigated that extremely well. I also really loved, because I fully expected when her mother passes and all the witch marks that were suppressed by her mother's magic become revealed, I fully expected for her voice to come back. And I was really glad it didn't. Like, I was really glad that that was not a plot line.
I didn't even think of that as an option.
I was in my head, I was like, if her voice comes back, I'm going to be so mad.
Well, great news. She's still mute. So at this, I will say though, neither of us have read the rest of the series. So,
Mm-mm.
that can come at any given point. You
Yeah.
never know. But I agree. I do like that she was mute. I do like that she had to communicate through sign language. Some
Mm-hmm.
of our listeners and their positive feedback was that specific case, was the fact that she had to communicate through sign language.
Mm-hmm.
I also felt like it had such a unique perspective on what it means to be silenced.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because even though she couldn't speak, there were some characters that specifically silenced her.
Mm-hmm.
That one being the first boyfriend. I can't remember his name.
Finn.
Finn. I was going to call him Dane. I'm like,
Is it Finn or Flynn? Flynn.
Finn.
I think it's Flynn.
Mm-hmm. One of those.
I was like, it's either Finn from Star Wars or Flynn Rider from
Yeah.
Rapunzel. I can't remember which.
Yeah. But like, there was moments where, she talked about how he would hold her hands in
Mm-hmm.
order to say something, and not let her speak. And there was and at one point she was worried that the witch collector would do the same thing to her. And it was an aspect that I thought that was like, oh, that would be cool to like do like a full analysis on. And I don't know how many other times that became a topic, because like even the evil king guy, he had her hands bound, but like, who wouldn't of an enemy?
Right.
So,
Right.
but it wasn't necessarily like a whole like hardcore silence, because even then he would have her sister communicate to her.
Mm-hmm.
So she really made, the author Charissa really made a point that we're like, okay, first boyfriend, bad.
Mm-hmm.
He silenced her.
Mm-hmm. I did not like him, and
Yeah.
I can already tell he's going to be a big factor in a future book, because the last image you see is basically him bitter and angry.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and other times the fact that he used his power as an excuse to like cozy on up to her.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was, but like at the same time she was like, yeah, but I knew what he was doing and it was hot, and we'd like, it's one of those like, I think Krista did a really good job of capturing that like aspect of young love.
I completely agree. And how you can still hold a flame for someone even if it's not going to work, and how he holds on, she doesn't. I think there were a lot of very interesting dynamics that I really, really enjoyed. I could tell there was also a lot of setup for future books. I'm excited to see what the outcome is, but I don't feel like it was a big, like, why didn't that get resolution in the first book?
I mean, okay, so I'm like, where do we go? Because there's so many like strains that we can talk about, but let me pull up some positives, because I think that the structure of the book we can get into, but like, let's just talk about some of the positives first. Okay, so I do want to talk a little bit more about Raina. It's fascinating. None of our listeners had anything that, like, no one said anything mean about her, but no one said anything beyond her signing. Yeah.
So I have a theory about this.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not a positive or negative.
Yep.
I feel like Charissa did what Stephanie Myers did for Bella. I could not pin down what she looked like ever until Charissa purposefully describes her sister as blonde and fair, and for one moment describes Raina as having darker skin than her sister, and that one looks more like their mother, one looks more like their father. But that's basically it.
Dark hair, tanner skin.
Yeah. And I genuinely did not know that until the end of the book.
Yeah.
She does more description of Alexis's black hair, long flowing black hair and his beard than of Raina. And I felt like that was intentional, and intentionally very much like Twilight.
Yeah, and I think there are moments where like she doesn't have to sit there and be like, my long raven hair, the chestnuts, the tone of chestnut. No, like you don't have to do that. But she could have a moment of like looking at her hand and being like, my normally tan skin crusted with dirt to make it look blah blah blah. You know what I mean? Or just kind of like, because they're filthy in the forest, they're dirty, and I think there's like moments where she can like, my hair fell forward limp, and the brown dirty and matted or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, she also has the benefit of dual POV. Why for Alexis?
Yeah, I forgot about that.
I mean, Raina does so much to describe Alexis for us. And
Yeah.
Alexis tells us how much he's paid attention to Raina for years.
He
And
calls her
yet
little beauty.
he calls her little beauty. But what? I don't know what she looks like.
I forgot about that. About the dual feel. You're right. He keeps calling her beauty. It's like doing the work without doing the work. And that felt more like a choice than anything else, rather than like her laziness. Yeah. I think it was more choice.
Yeah, I don't think it was laziness. It came across as very intentional. I don't know what the intention is.
It could be one of those like trick lineage things, like her looks and what she, the tan skin. Like the fact that she doesn't mention that her sister's more fair than her until the very end, I thought, and then her saying like she had darker skin, darker hair. And even though she does like, we look like our father and mother, it still felt like, I don't know, like this is going to come into play later. Like it was enough of a plot twist where I was like, and not twist, it's just plot twist. It was more of like a little detail where I was like, how did you not tell us about how the sister looked until the very end?
Yeah.
How does she not have a memory thinking of like, chasing my older sister, and running behind her blonde locks, you know what I mean? Or something like that. So I also thought it was weird that like the sister is super blonde and fair and she's with the Ice King who's super blonde and fair. And I was like, I don't say it's gross, but like, I don't know. I just
some people are into that. Again, it might be intentional because both Alexis and Raina have dark hair.
Have you ever seen guys who have like really light blonde hair try to grow a beard? It's like flesh colored. I think of Spencer Pratt from The Hills.
I don't know who that is.
You're in China.
I'm sorry.
It's fine. It's fine.
But let's talk about Raina's good qualities, despite us not knowing what she looks like.
I thought we were talking about her good qualities, and then I realized that we have not. Okay, so one thing that I appreciated is that a lot of times we get in books, the heroines will be like, I've often been told that I'm stubborn and I can, and I'm willful type thing. Like every single female character, a lead female character is stubborn, is willful, but we did see that. And so this is one of the times that I felt like Raina's character of her being stubborn, of her being like, no, I'm going to do my own thing, was established from the very beginning, with her being like, screw y'all, I'm going to try to take down this witch collector, to the very end. So, this whole thing of very intense trope of a type of like, stabby female character came into play and was realistic, and I didn't hate her for it. I thought that her rage and her anger was always understandable.
I completely agree. And for me, it's because the stubbornness came from a place of rage that it was believable. Stubbornness for the sake of stubbornness.
It's hard. It's hard
It's hard and it's overused.
Yeah.
And I understand it's a thing because I'm that way. However, you emotionally connect with Raina and understand her attitude towards things quickly because we understand the source of the rage and the nature of her rage.
Yeah.
And that's what feeds the stubbornness. And I thought it was really well done. I really appreciated that everyone in her life is like, I feel your anger. You can move past it. We want the best for you. And Raina's just like, fuck y'all. Like, you won't do the hard thing that needs to be done, which is kill this guy. So I'm going to do it.
Yeah. I respect that. What I love about her rage and anger, because we know where it comes from. Her sister was taken. She has no idea what happened to her sister. In her mind, it's like she's been forced to stay. She's been held captive. There's nothing I can do about it, right? And then we find out at the very end that her sister was happy and had a whole life. So while Raina was there thinking for years, what do I do? How do I get her back? How can I become stronger? Learning about more aspects of her power, not knowing what's happening, thinking the absolute worst, we find out that her sister was teaching their special language to other kids. We find out that her sister fell in love with the king, with the Winter King. We find that she was friends with Alexis, sorry. We find out that like her sister had a whole ass happy life. And for 8 years, Raina was stuck in her own anger. And I thought that it was a very subtle, or maybe it wasn't subtle, maybe it was more in your face, but I thought it was a very nice, painful twist to the reader too, of being like, that freaking sucks.
Yeah, and I think it sucks, but it also makes so much sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
She was 16 when her sister's taken. So, of course, she's not able to process
Yeah.
maybe a more complex understanding of the situation. That
Mm-hmm.
maybe her sister at the age of 22, over the next 8 years, until she's 30,
Yeah.
is capable of making the best of her situation and is capable of growing past any resentment.
And that's the thing where it's like, I don't think she's, maybe we haven't explored it because we're not in book 2 and stuff, but I understand being like, well, I'm happy that you weren't tortured for all these years, but like, I was tortured.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was a wreck. Why wasn't there a little letter sent to me saying, hey, I'm good. Don't worry about me. Like, I mean, like, and I'm hoping that that becomes like a bigger theme in the upcoming books, because
Hmm.
I think that if I was Raina, I would definitely be on that high horse of like, I was like ready to like tear the world down for you. I have been in hell waiting for
Hmm.
you, and
Yeah.
you've been out having fun. You couldn't send one freaking letter. Is that not allowed?
Right. I mean, Alexis came by every year. She
Yeah.
could have given, and they were friends. Nephilim could have given him a letter to hand off to Raina.
Or just a message of
Yeah.
saying like, your sister says that she's well. I thought that was a good impression.
I think you did a fabulous job.
Thank you.
Can I ask the question of whether or not we believe in her fighting ability? What little of it she has.
I was thinking about that as I was reading it. Okay. I'm leaning a little bit more towards okay, is that she was never described as a pure master. Like, I don't think she was described as like a warrior within her own right, because we have her friend Helena who comes in and she's like the bigger badass.
Yeah.
Raina was just more of like, I can survive here. However, we never saw Raina get injured from her fighting. You know what I mean? Like, there was never examples of her being like, oh, because I messed up. Like, Alexis is the one who got stabbed a bunch of times. Like, and
Yeah.
she never. So I think I waver on this. What are your thoughts?
I don't think what she was capable of ever took me out of the story. I think
Mm-hmm.
I believed her to be fueled by enough rage
Mm-hmm.
and enough lack of care for herself
Yeah.
that I believed her ability to cut people down, because she just was not going
Gave
to
no
hesitate.
fucks. Yeah.
She gave no fucks. And sometimes she had a godlike weapon. Sometimes she didn't. Sometimes she did.
Also, like, what kind of courage would someone have? Because I think, half of battling, as someone who's never been in a sword battle before, I feel like half of it is like confidence that you're going to be fine. And she
Yeah.
can save herself. Like, she can heal her own wounds.
Yeah. And that gives her an edge.
Yeah. And how much of that is like well, what, you're going to cut me? I'll take care of it.
Yeah. So what?
Yeah.
She does have one wound in her side at one point. That
Because she was dragged. She fell, it was in the cave. She was finding out all the information. And I think she like had fallen through, it was from a rock. It wasn't from a person.
I don't think while I was reading, I was bothered by the fact that there's no major injury, and that really her greatest injuries are when she saves someone from death, basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nevertheless, I recognize it wasn't necessarily realistic, but I think everything else worked so well for me that I was willing to suspend my disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
And I was
Yeah.
like, okay.
Yeah. And, I'll double down on this. Like, Helena being a better fighter than her, it helps a lot that, Raina's not the master swordswoman here.
Yep. I completely agree.
So let's talk about some things that people did not like as much.
So we have a couple comments about the plot of the book not being a favorite. One of our listeners says, this was one of my rare DNFs. Got bored of them walking through a forest. Which I have to say, I was shocked that that was basically the entire book. I really expected the travel to not be the plot.
Yeah, I'm even going to quote my cousin Evelyn on this, because normally I can like pinpoint it being like, you'll love this book, because I really enjoyed this book too. And she said, I got a little lost though on what her and the witch collector were doing. Then the fact that he was suddenly a magical dude and he made his knife, and the knife was made too coincidental. We'll get into that. But for some big reason, I kept waiting for the big moment, and then I realized I was almost done with the book.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say, when I read it the first time and then being more aware of this the second time, it was still like so that was it?
Yeah.
That's what we did? And I can't tell if this was one of those things where Charissa was trying to decide, I need this setup to happen before I get to these other books.
I felt like it was all entirely set up. I felt like the reveal of Nephili and her relationship with the king, the way Carissa wrote it, she intentionally wanted it to be at the end.
Yeah.
She wanted to give Raina time with Alexis for them to form a bond, for her to second guess herself. I understand all of that. It did feel just like a setup book. You know what it came across to me as? It came across to me as a season of Game of Thrones where one of the characters is just trying to get from point A to point B. Yeah. And that's their entire arc over the season. That's what this book came across as.
I think that traveling can still be part of the plot. No, I don't know. I'm struggling on this because things happened, the Helena and then the other trying to get to and from these other soldiers and trying to like go around it. I think the plot it just needed more plot. It needed like one other thing. Maybe there had to be another aspect of racing across the woods. Because like we know that they're trying to get to Winterhold. We know that that's like the goal of the book. But there's no urgency to that. Yeah. In my opinion. Even though they're telling us the bad guys, the Eastlanders, are almost there. They're holding up down the fort. We start the book with so many attacks, right? Like we know the Eastlanders are on their way. So like the book starts with high stakes, but then it turns into a romantic ride in the woods.
Yeah, it's true. Under the moonlight.
Yeah, under the moonlight. And me constantly questioning of, you haven't brushed your teeth in a long time. And it turned into that where it slowed it down. So I think like we started off the book with super high stakes, super intense action, and then the action stopped.
I completely agree. The first act is super enthralling. It's super convincing. It feels high stakes. I believe that Raina is going to go through with killing the witch collector. I loved every moment of that. And then it peters out. And then it's like, okay, there's a lot of snow and they're making eyes at each other and they get some kisses in and they get some fondling in and they're hungry, but it's fine.
Yeah.
They're gonna get there. We were told there were high stakes, but it didn't feel high stakes.
It didn't. The most we got from was Helena and the wraith inside her, which was cool. Like I thought that was a cool moment. It was interesting, but that was like a blip in the overall grand scheme of things.
Yep, I completely agree.
And it was just another way of getting the knife to her.
Absolutely.
Which, like, I don't know, Helena, originally I was like, how did Helena get the knife again? And when I was like paying attention this time, it was like, she was saying that I saw your body there, lifeless. And so I grabbed the knife and left. And I was like, Amy, if I saw your body, I would need to confirm life. Like I wouldn't just look at it. It would be face down. Are you breathing? Put a little leaf there. You're still warm. I don't know. Like it would just be a lot would be involved of like confirming proof of life.
I mean, I get it. She wanted the knife has magic about it that makes people want to keep it safe.
Yeah.
Got it. She wanted to take a token of her friend to remember her by. Got it.
Yeah.
I don't think she was bleeding. Like,
no, she just was not moving. Like you were laying there lifeless. That's passed out.
Yeah. I can guarantee she wasn't gray. She hadn't bled out and gone into rigor mortis. So, yeah, I thought that was a little weak. But Helena, for all her swordsmanship, might not be the brightest tool in the shed, sharpest tool in the shed. Poor Helena.
There, talk about like another weak moment. It was like, I don't know whose dumbass plan it was, but when her and Raina were like, oh no, they have Alexis. We need to get him back. Let's fight off the Eastlanders. I'm going to lure them. And then she immediately gets captured. What grand plan was this? I wanted to be a little bit more impressed. Like it was such a fold.
I actually appreciated that their plan failed because
the plan can fail. Go ahead.
I just felt like it was realistic. It's not realistic to expect two 24-year-olds to outsmart
a general.
I
don't need to plan to have worked. I just needed such a dumbass plan.
Just a better plan.
Just a better plan where she's like, hey guys, like Helena's in the wood, like, hey, come this way. Ooh, I'm not going to tell you anything unless you follow me into a cave.
Yeah, yeah.
That's like,
doesn't work for you.
A slightly better plan.
Yeah.
I think it could still fail, but that was just a dumb plan.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Alexis in the corner being like, these idiots. Do they really
try harder?
Try so much harder. Yeah. They both have power. Why didn't they use their flame? Like, Helena has flame magic.
I'm sure there are reasons. I don't know what those reasons are.
Nor will we ever know.
Probably not.
So let's talk a little bit about Alexis.
Everyone likes Alexis.
What are your thoughts on Alexis? Amy's face. I think we just got her thoughts on Alexis.
This goes actually to something folks didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't like how short-lived the enemies portion of the book was, and how instant the attraction was. I don't know if I agree. I mean, this isn't a true enemies to lovers.
Angry
Jack
puppy.
and I, it's an angry puppy to lovers.
Yeah.
You know, Raina's yelling at the wall, brandishing a weapon.
Yeah.
Just yelling.
Stabbing a scarecrow.
Yeah.
And he's like, really... and he just goes by every year being like, she's pretty.
Well, yeah. And, oh, I like her passion. Like, I like her anger.
He's like, maybe in another world I'd write her poetry. And I was when he said that, I was like, nope, we draw the line somewhere.
He says that twice. Once at the beginning of the book, once at the end.
But I do like at the very end, he goes, and maybe in another world has to be this world, where he decides like, I'm gonna go for her, which is sweet. But like, even though his dumb little like everything. Anyway, but yeah, like people did not like that immediate switch, but like it does make sense on his part.
Yeah,
her part. It could have used a little bit more finessing.
Yeah, I agree. I think it could have used more time, more angry puppiness. I did appreciate that she starts out hating him. Yeah. I did appreciate that he's the one who's attracted to her first instead of the opposite way around. I appreciate that. But I think that's the extent of where that goes. Alexis, I don't know. I think I foresaw all of his twists and turns coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everything felt predictable for me, not in a bad way. I think the rate at which the information was revealed was acceptable.
Yeah.
He's very noble. I don't know if I liked that or not. Maybe I wanted him to be more problematic.
I love a problematic character. Going back to the pacing of their love before I go back into him, because I wanted to kind of say something. If I were to have written this or given notes, I would have liked her first moment of attraction to him not be until they were in their little Garden of Eden situation. At that point, she was like ready to have sex with him.
Right.
And while I love that scene, I think I would have been happier with her not realizing her own attraction until there. And I know that we have to get it at a moment at the very end of her being like, no, I'm going to choose you. I think you could have still done a variation of that. I think that they still as much as I love the sex scenes and everything, I think that the attraction could have started there, maybe have a sex scene at the end, maybe not be so like I am halfway in love with him, but just to be like, you know what? I feel something that I've never felt before. It's a kernel, it's a spark, and I'm going to go forward with this type thing. Like, I think that she doesn't have to be in love with Alexi to not choose Flynn.
Yeah, the two.
I don't think she has to have been in love with him to not choose him.
I think we're aligned on the fact that she didn't have to become attracted to him or recognize her attraction as quickly. She didn't have to act on that attraction as quickly. I would have been okay with it being more of a slow burn.
Yeah.
I would have been okay with him claiming her and them not being in love.
Yeah, I agree. I would have preferred that.
Yeah, I would have enjoyed the problematicness of that.
Yeah.
And seeing how that unfolds later on. I would have preferred Raina saying, I'm going to help you find the king, not because I'm in love with you, but because I love and trust my sister. And even though I don't understand it and I'm mad about it, this is important to her.
Yeah.
like the beginning started because of her love for her sister. I wanted it to end because of her love for her sister, not
Yeah.
because of her love for Alexis.
And I mean, at the very end, she does tell her, like, I ride into battle for this country. I ride into battle for my sister, and I ride into battle for you. I think that the emphasis on the for you part didn't need to happen. I don't think there should have been any sex in here. I think the final moment should have been a kiss, and then worry that Finn was going to show up, and then her being like, hey, I still don't love him. She already said that she doesn't care about him because, one, he silenced her. Two, he tried to stop her from going and exploring this world. She said at the very beginning that they were never compatible.
Yeah.
And I think that it would have been more impactful for me of like, this is a woman who's made her own choice on another man a long time ago, and liking someone new doesn't have a sway on that.
You and I are aligned. No sex needed to occur. You know, maybe some fondling that gets interrupted so that we get a good, like, angsty moment. Love it. Great. Wish that had happened. I didn't enjoy the end sequence when they do have sex. I didn't like how upset she got about Alexis and the king's lives being intertwined. I didn't feel like that was realistic. I felt like it was creating drama for the sake of drama. Mm-hmm. And I didn't like how she's like, I can't live with this. I can't possibly fall in love with someone who could die at any moment. I'm going to go tell him. And then, you know what? I showed up in a robe. I'm going to tell him so hard.
And then I'm going to fuck him so hard instead.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't love that. I felt it was completely unnecessary.
Especially the, like, I don't want to be with someone who can die at any instant. Babe, that's life. That's like every other person out there. That's not a unique thing. Yes, his life is intertwined with another being, but you know, I think the, like, discovering that you have a god that you absolutely hate and the fact that he's immortal is, like, you know, the bigger issue here.
Yeah. I could explain it away, but she's been abandoned by so many people in her life, right? Mm-hmm. Her father died suddenly. Her mother died suddenly. Her sister was taken from her. She doesn't want another person taken from her. Understood, but I don't think she would also willingly choose to leave that person.
Yeah.
I think it would have been more convincing if she did not have as strong feelings for him, if that makes sense.
So going back to, like, kind of what you're saying where Alexi, like, you know, Alexis, like, how he's very honorable, mm-hmm. you know, and does that make us like him? I think I enjoyed that he's a different type of character mm-hmm. in the sense that he's noble, he's kind, there's nothing wrong with him. You know what I mean? Like, and I think it's refreshing in a world full of, like, quote unquote morally gray characters.
Yeah.
You know, but is he my book boyfriend? I mean, who am I to say no to anyone to be my book boyfriend? You know, but like,
I think you hit it on the head for me though. He's practically perfect.
Yeah.
I don't believe a man like that exists.
Well, he did the thing that, like, we have harped on every single episode of, like, previous books. He would not have sex with her until he disclosed the truth about himself. And I respect that.
I do respect it.
So it's like, what do we get when we get a character who addresses all the things we bitched about in the previous things? You know what I mean?
Maybe he needs to be less nice.
Okay, what is it about him?
I mean, the problem is, for me, he has no flaws.
Yeah.
Maybe he can be less attractive. Maybe he can, I don't know, yell at her because she can't yell back. Maybe, I don't know.
I'm genuinely trying to think, but, like, what's the big impression of him? Like, what's the thing that we can walk away from is that he's just, like, a really good guy. He's just, like, really comforting. He's saying that he's going to be selfish when it comes to her and he's going to protect her and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like we need to perpetuate horrible male characters.
Yeah.
I'm on board with bringing male characters who are able to step it up in a way that, you know, let's go back to From Blood and Ash. Like, you and I had a lot of issues with what's his face there.
It's true.
So, like, I'm happy we don't have that again. But, like, if we have this and we have a type of character, male character, where we don't have those problematic things, what I need from the book then is higher stake plot.
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't need to have him to be the dramatic thing. And I'm okay if their relationship isn't the dramatic thing, you know? Like, that's not the thing that drives all of it. You know, it's not like his choices. I'm going to come back to compare it from Blood and Ash, and I don't know if that's, like, a fair thing to do, but, you know, our podcast, our rules. And you know, that character, I cannot remember his name. It was Poppy and
Hawk?
Hawk. Thank you. Yeah. So when you think about Hawk from Blood and Ash, the plot twist and the turns was based off of his deception and off of him and their dynamic.
Yeah.
When you look at the plot twist here, yeah, it's about some of like, you know, truth about him, but he's not mean about it. He doesn't have sex with her without telling her.
Right.
And it's more about like the other outside forces than anything else. If we're going to do that and have a really honorable male character, which I do want more of, make the stakes higher then.
Yeah, I completely agree. The stakes just were not high enough, that I'm trying to invent higher stakes by making the male more problematic instead of accepting that he doesn't have to be problematic.
Yeah, like everything was smooth sailing, even though they were like not smooth sailing, even though they were, you know, constantly being threatened and, you know, fighting for their lives. You know what he reminded me of? Did you ever watch Sailor Moon? Did I make you watch Sailor Moon?
I never watched it. I did read it.
Oh, okay. He reminds me of Tuxedo Mask.
Yeah.
Like the second time he got stabbed, and he even says like, "I'm tired of being stabbed," and I think she saves him like a third time, and it just reminded me a lot of like Tuxedo Mask, where like he's just a really good guy who just needs a lot of help sometimes.
Yeah,
he just needs to be saved a lot.
He does, which is funny because he's very strong. I understand he's suppressing his magic, or using all his magic to suppress a god inside him.
Yep. So let's shift to some of the positives that people had, and that was the magic system. First off, there is one. That's huge.
I loved it because there's a system that is easy to understand but doesn't feel simple.
Yes.
I liked the complexity of the singing. I liked how Charissa addresses that with a character who has no voice. I really thought that was actually very beautiful, and I enjoyed her journey of discovering she doesn't actually need a voice.
Yeah.
She doesn't even need her hands sometimes.
Yeah.
To be able to use her magic. I really enjoyed that. I thought that was very, very well done.
I really enjoyed how the magic was described. Like she's pulling at strings, at threads. Like even when she would heal some people, like she said that she could like imagine the skin weaving together, the threads weaving. And then the fact that she could imagine, you know, when she could see when something was wrong with someone, and it's like, you know, it wasn't weaving together correctly, and or she calls it like little death, you know, and she could feel the little deaths inside her.
Yeah.
I felt like that was pretty good. You know, I mean, it was a lot of info dump at the very beginning, and I didn't realize just like how aggressive an info dump it was until I was like re-listening. I'm like, oh man, but I wasn't mad at that. I wasn't mad at, I think that when you get a lot of magic systems and books nowadays, you just kind of get like generalized magic. I think we are understanding limitations. That's another one that we don't always get is in other books is like, what is everyone's limit? Yeah. What are they capable of doing? Yeah. And the fact that she is capable of doing some fire, but you know, she's not able to necessarily grasp that entirely. I hope that as the series continues, and because I do want to go back and I have the rest on Audible. As I finish it, I hope that the magic continues to develop, especially where at the end, I was a little confused about the final battle, but it wasn't really a battle between her and the evil king, and she was like holding on to her sister and the Winter King, and then it was like a tug of war, and then so there was a lot of stuff. It was all mental things happening, so I wasn't quite sure what was happening, but I think that it'll be clarified later. But that helps with the world building. I'm gonna do another world building shift if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
I think this is something that I saw in the positives, and I saw people say it in the negatives. The gods. And the backstory of the gods.
Yeah, that was a huge info dump. What, 75% of the way through the book? I couldn't process it.
I had to restart, re-listen multiple times, and this was my second go-through. And maybe that's an Audible versus physical book thing, that it was harder to grasp. But I mean, there's a fair amount of comments in the negatives that people were saying that they just couldn't figure out what was going on with all these gods.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a basic understanding, but there was so much information that I'm sure is relevant later, but I feel like it could have been pared down.
Yeah.
We know by the end of the book that Raina loves to read and that she hasn't had access to books.
Yeah.
A lot of this stuff about the gods could have been read later. and could have come up later. All she needed to know were the basics to know what was going on inside of Alexis and why that was relevant.
Yeah, I mean, it was a whole lot of like, and then this person was in love with this person, and then this person was in love, and then this one was a,
But
and
they
it
were
does,
separated by this one, and this
yeah,
one was cursed.
and then they went back, and I mean, and it doesn't help that all these names are like, fantasy names too.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
I'm like, just, all right, so Bob was in love with Linda.
Yeah. Let's just dumb it down real
I
much.
need it dumbed down real hard for this. Like, deliver to me in a way of gossip. You know what I mean? Like, just say it like, oh my God, you would not believe the tea that I just heard. But that being said, it is very rich for the world. You do not get world building like that often with kind of romantasies like this, right? It reminds me very much so of like more high fantasy books.
Mm-hmm.
She could almost like write a whole other book based on what happened.
It did feel like there was a lot of backstory developed and a lot of thought put into the history and the legends of this world or this continent. And it makes me believe that it will be relevant later. It makes me believe that there is significance and will come into the story in the future. I think for me, it just bogged it down too much. If we look at A Court of Thorns and Roses, all we know is the Spring Court, and that's all we care about.
Yeah.
We don't think about the other courts until we have to think about the other courts.
And we know about the other courts. Like,
we know they exist.
Not like, and it's not like we don't know. Like, we meet the other leaders of the other courts, but it's like still contained within the Spring Court.
Yeah, A Court of Thorns and Roses is so contained, and for a first book, that's what this needed to be.
Yeah.
And it wasn't by the end of it. It was okay contained as it was, probably for the first 60%. And then I felt like it spiraled a little bit after that.
It's a lot, like this book was a setup book, and I'm okay with that. How much of it is needing to do setup and how much of it is Alexis being like, I should tell you everything, because I would want that too, like I'd be pissed off if this guy who's like super noble and good held back. It's hard. Like, I don't have an answer for Charissa. Plus, it's already been published and it's done. So it's not like, anything could be done about it. I think it's within character of Alexis to tell her everything. He wants to be transparent. He wants to tell her everything. He doesn't want to like bed her under like, misguided thoughts and impressions. So that makes sense. But then like, how do you merge the two, right?
I think for me, I would have, if I was Carissa's editor and I could go back in time, I think I would challenge her to find a different way to tell the gods' story through structure.
Yeah.
You know how in Fourth Wing, how there's always a little bit of the Book of Brennan at the start of each chapter?
Yeah.
I would have done something like that. Or I would have done like chunks of the story at the start of each part or something, and then have it, and we don't know who's telling this story until we get to that part of the novel. And we're like, oh my gosh, Alexis has been telling us the story the whole time.
Oh, I like that a lot. I'm going to steal that.
I always wanted to do something like that. I think it's very difficult to do.
Yeah. I'll give you credit, I promise. No, but I mean, that's a good idea though. Like there's other ways of doing this, right? Whether it's that way, whether it's having the Wraith divulge some information, whether it's having the general divulge some information, whether it's the evil king divulging information while he's in her head. Like there's a lot of things that can be spread apart. But I like the idea of authors doing the brain exercise of saying, how do I go outside the standard linear book? And that's not on a Charissa note. That is a every author note. That's an even ourselves author note.
Yeah, completely. I understand sometimes when we as authors are writing a fantasy novel, linear is best because you're working on so many different aspects that are so difficult to write. Fantasies are very difficult to write. And I do think overall I enjoyed The Witch Collector as a fantasy book. However, I think adding a little bit of complexity to break up what would be an info dump, to add sophistication to the narrative is worth the endeavor. We've seen it in things like the 5th season in Fourth Wing and again in Iron Flame. It's not something that Yaros came up with herself. Plenty of other novelists have done it, but I think it added a level of sophistication to her writing that didn't exist without it.
I agree. And I don't know Carissa's other books, so I don't know her other writings as much. I don't know if this was her first book or not, but it was a good book. Like, I think,
Yeah.
you know, for all the things that that we're talking about, I still very much enjoyed this book. I would like to imagine that she has the skill and ability to do that sophistication that you're talking about. You know who I feel like I have absolute confidence doing, and she kind of did a little bit of it, is Carissa Broadbent. She can do no wrong. I feel like she could do, like, picture your idea, Amy, and she'll run with it. She'll do it. I have full faith in her.
I mean, she's already kind of done it in
with
The Serpent and the Wings of Night.
Which she did. Never mind.
She did. Yeah, she did it at the
She
start.
Did it even at Herbert. God, she's so cool. Just love her all over again.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just read a funny comment. I would do terrible things for Alexis. You know what? I'm wrong. There are people who that's their book boyfriend.
Yeah, and you know what? It's because he's not problematic, and that's a good thing.
We should want that. I will say though that this person says the series grows really well. I think the first book was good, but the second one is great. I did see a number of people say that to us. They said that the second book is absolutely phenomenal and, you know, definitely worth the read to continue. And maybe that's like the same thing with an ACOTAR, although ACOTAR, we will, you know, that'll be our hill to die on, is that first book was incredible.
But part of it is because we know how much it sets up for the second book.
So maybe that's like once we go into the second book and stuff. I had someone DM'd us and they're like, the first book is for Jack, the second book is for Amy. And I don't know what that means.
For this book?
Yeah. They're like, the first book is Jack, the second book is for Amy. And I'm like, what?
Now I'm curious.
And I don't know if I'm insulted.
You shouldn't be.
I'll reserve that. We'll see.
I reserve the right.
I reserve the right to be insulted if I so wish.
Oh, one of the comments, I think this is funny, thought it was weird that they started getting sexy while her sister was quote unquote watching them.
That's so true. That's so true. That's, you know, fair
Thanks,
play.
sister, for creating this little oasis for us in the middle of the snow. Now watch us get our freak on.
Can't wait to sleep with your friend.
I mean, not that I think Nephili could actually see them.
Yeah.
I feel like it was more of a sense thing, but I don't know. But if you're sensing your sister get freaky with your friend, that's also a little strange.
It is. Okay, so Evelyn did say, my cousin, the fact that he was some magical dude and he made the magical knife was just too coincidental.
I actually disagree. I mean, I could see it coming. It didn't bother me. I felt like the reveal was slow enough.
And then how much of it is the reason why he was drawn to her is that he was drawn to the knife?
Which I think he kind of also says.
Yeah. I think when it comes to books, it's such a fine line between coincidental and plot and everything. And you're not going to write about something that's just going to not make sense. Like, it has to, like, you know, be streamlined. I understand the general feeling that if you're already kind of struggling with the whole book of like, this is just kind of dragging and everything, then I get that. I agree. I mean, just because something is predictable doesn't make it bad.
Right. I think the question is, was it earned? I feel like there was enough work done to allude to the connection. I felt like there was enough that I didn't feel like it was unearned. I didn't feel like this was something that came out of left field and was a convenient way to fill up a plot hole.
What about Neri being trapped in him? What are your thoughts there? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like, you're on a roll and I wanted to see if that roll would continue.
That was also obvious to me at the beginning.
Oh,
not that it was Neri specifically, but Alexis, like in the first chapter of his point of view, explicitly states how he doesn't have access to his magic. And there was something about it that I was like, he's using it for another purpose to guard the darkness inside him.
Yeah.
And so that setup, I always knew he was using his magic to keep something locked up inside him. I always knew what it is. So it was not surprising to me that it ended up being a god.
Oh, I didn't catch that at all. Good job.
Oh, really?
You're a good reader.
Thanks.
Once it came to it, I wasn't I wasn't surprised. I don't think I guessed it, but I wasn't surprised of like, oh yeah, you have a god trapped in you. This seems on brand. I loved that it was Neri, the god she hated, inside of him. Him releasing Neri at the end of the book, would that have been the big bang moment that people were looking for? if we had known about Neri being trapped inside of him earlier. Because we find out explicitly that Neri's trapped inside of him. This is really, like, he is using all his power to keep him inside. And then just a few chapters later, he lets him go.
He bargains with him.
Yeah, but he lets him go. Like, Neri's out of him now. But it goes from, like, that's a high stake thing, right? I use every inch of my power to keep this god contained. I live my life now to keep this god contained. And then to, like, and that's, like, a high thing. Like, that's, like, a fair... So I feel like that would have been also good information to when we realize, like, oh, shit, he's going to use a little bit of his power. You know, the cages are rattled. Neri might get out. And then for him to release it, that might have been a good earlier plot point and threat, high stake thing to have.
Well, I guess I'm confused because I felt like that happened when he kind of blew up the Eastlanders.
Yeah.
And created that crater, right? And Rhaena shows up even though he tells her to stay away. And she doesn't know how he unleashes that power. But he's like, when I'm in that state, I could kill you.
Yeah, but it's not said explicitly what it is.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know at that point of, like, holy shit, he almost let Neri out. We just know, you know, oh, he's powerful and he might hurt her. And I'm like, you know, that's called a Tuesday in fantasy books. Like... Give me something more.
I guess for me, because I had figured out there was something in him and that was the thing that had caused the explosion. And that was the thing that would kill her if she got too close to him in that state. I guess I felt like I'd already seen those stakes.
That's fair. I think it's also fair that, like, since the general consensus is, like, not general, but, like, a lot of the comments that we saw was like, what was happening? What was the plot? It would have been good to see maybe him struggle with Neri more, other than that one moment.
Yeah, I do agree. It would have been nice if he's been struggling with Neri for hundreds of years inside him, for some of that control to be wearing down.
Yeah.
And for Neri to surface more unintentionally. And maybe for Alexis to not even be aware of it. Like, I do agree with that. I agree that would have raised the stakes for all of us. And it would have made him being unleashed and Alexis choosing to unleash him more impactful.
Yeah. That would have been just a little bit, just a little pizzazzy. Little something there to kind of add that high stakes in the middle.
Yeah. I tried to shimmy and instead I just rocked the entire desk.
I figured that is what you were trying to do. Overall, like... Yeah, there's notes. Yeah, there's things I might have, like, if it was just my book, I would change it. For me, that doesn't speak to what a bad book is or a good book is. Like, I do this exercise with every book so that I can figure out what I'd want to do.
Yeah.
But, you know, I've read 77 books this year, and Witch Collector stands out. I really enjoyed The Witch Collector.
I think there were some things that were done so well.
Yeah.
That made me really appreciate this book, that I have no doubt that I will go finish the series.
Yep.
Unlike some other books we've done for book club, where I don't need to read more than the first book. This book, I am curious about what happens. I do like the dynamic between the characters most of the time. I do like our main female character. I like her rage. I like her disability. I like the way that the author is handling these things. And so I do want to keep reading. And I think it's a great start to our winter book club.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's set in winter.
There's snow.
Such a random thought. I know we were wrapping up, but I had a random thought. I feel bad for the sister when we find out that her lover king can now go see Thea, his ex-lover. And it's like, you're immortal? My first thought would be like, shit. Don't go back and see her, the person that you fell in love with for one afternoon 300 years ago.
That actually will be very interesting to see how that plays out.
I'm curious to see if there's more POVs in the future or if we're going to get these storylines played out on the side.
Yeah.
Which I'm okay either way.
I think it depends on what happens next. I guess my hope would be that there is a little bit more substance to the plot in the next book.
Same. Which I think there's been plenty of setup for it.
Tons of setup for it.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk with Jack and Amy. We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. Next week, we'll be discussing Guild by Raven Kennedy.
We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. If you'd like to submit your take on any of the books
If you're enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon or Venmo. You can also follow us on TikTok or Instagram at the handle BookTalkForBookTalk.
Bye.
So, okay. Sorry,
You hate him so much you threw your microphone down.
No, my microphone did that on its own accord.